All right, everybody. We are live with State Senator, Alaska State Senator Shelley Hughes. She happens to be my state senator. I did vote for her, um, and I think she's one of the good ones. And she is here to talk about Senate Bill 173 that she has introduced. So, Miss Hughes, if you would like to go ahead and uh, talk about the bill for just a second, what it is and what it is not, and then I'll get on to my questions that I have for you. So.
Absolutely. First, I want to thank you and I want to thank your audience. It's good to have a platform like this where we can have an open dialogue and really get accurate information. The mainstream media has misrepresented this bill, and the Facebook algorithms have really suppressed me in recent years. There used to be, if I would do a clip to give some accurate information, I could have 10,000 views within 24 hours, 40,000 views in a day or so. And now, 24 hours later, literally, Chuck, I may have 8 views. I mean,
I
that's how
feel you there.
pathetic it is. So it's
Yeah.
very hard when it gets misrepresented in the mainstream media to get the word out. So your forum is greatly appreciated, to say the least. So
Anytime.
my bill was birthed. Well, first of all, I love kids and want to make sure that they have the best chances, right? So very disturbing when you hear the news stories that have been happening across the country, and as they picked up pace. And every time I hear a story like that, and you hear some of the details, I don't care if you're anti-gun or pro-gun. I think most everybody thinks, what would have happened if there would have been somebody that could have stopped the active shooter? And and you always think of the things at the front end that a school might be able to do. So SB 173 is concealed. I back up and say that it requires school districts to have somebody with the goal of having one person in at least one person in each school who would conceal carry. And there's some certain qualifications, and we'll talk about why that is. And you're welcome to ask me about that if I don't weave that in. Um, but it really, my view is that our kids are sitting ducks. And as I've watched what's happened in the lower 48, aware that we had an incident, actually, we were the very first of this wave, this tragic wave, back in 1997 out at Bethel High School. So that was like the first shooting that is now in this era of active shooters incidents in schools. And so as I've watched this, I just realized we need to do something. We have a huge state. Law enforcement does its best to arrive on the scene. But even on Matsu Borough is the sign of West Virginia. It can be an hour before they would arrive at some schools. And in an active shooting incident, it's going to occur within 2 to 5 minutes. So even in an urban area, lives are going to be lost if you don't have someone on site to respond immediately. But then think I've lived in Hoona, out in Bethel and Fort Yukon. So I've lived in remote villages. And our villages right now have no law enforcement that are armed. Now they have tribal police officers, village public safety officers, but they are not armed. So we have 80% of our communities are without armed law enforcement. I asked our commissioner of Department of Public Safety how long, and when they've gotten a call, what's the length of because of weather that can delay them getting out. He says it's been as long as 5 days. We know certainly it could be a half day, even if the weather's good, just by the time they get out there. Well, that's not a response that's going to save lives, right? So the bill is, it's not a matter of if an incident is going to happen in Alaska, it's a matter of when, because the pace is picking up, they're happening. We have a lot of troubled people in this world. And so we need to be prepared. We can do the stuff on the front end. You can harden the school environment. You can make sure certain doors are locked. You can make people sign in at the front office. You can have a security camera. But I tell you, people are still getting through. So what are you doing at the back end? What's the stopgap? And I think doing nothing is wrong, and it's going to cost lives. So my bill is an attempt to put something in that we could actually get through this legislature. And, you could, under our Constitution, under our laws, a superintendent could just choose to allow concealed carry. None of
Correct.
them have done that since statehood. None of them. If I were
Um,
to put forward a really pure and clean bill that just said superintendent shall allow concealed carry, it would go nowhere.
right.
So here we are. So to try to get something through that I can actually get the votes for, and by the way, out of 20 senators, I think I probably have 12 or 13 votes. Now, does that mean it'll move through? No, because it's very political, has to do with who chairs a committee. And I'm not actually in the current majority right now. So typically a minority member in this particular legislature, minority members' bills typically do not move. But the Senate president himself told me he liked the bill. I know that there are Republicans in the Senate majority that like it. So we'll see what happens. But this is the bill I think that can get through. And let me explain, rather than a one-liner bill that requires superintendents to allow concealed carry, what this does is requires schools to assign the job duty of concealed carry to certain individuals. So there's individuals have to have a concealed carry permit. They have to meet the psychological assessment and medical screening required by the Alaska Police Standards Council. And they have to go through a basic active shooter training that is specific to school environments. And that's pretty key, because that's the thing that I think I think the people that would be fearful of just saying concealed carry in schools, they want to know the person's stable and they want to know they're trained. So the bill covers that. I worked with the NRA as an example for a couple of years to get it right, because we didn't want to infringe on the citizen's right who's out on the street. So
Right.
just like NRA is okay with police officers needing to be trained, if we made it an assigned duty for a district staff, a school staff, that takes it to a different level, I guess, or it's a job duty, right? And
Right.
so if the district then has training, that's a little bit different. So that's what we did, making sure also the individual didn't have to cover the cost of the training, and that if they had to take time off from their other duties, they would still be paid. So that's what it does. I also have said on the record that if the state mandates this, the state should pay for it. So it shouldn't have to come out of the district's pocket. And I urge the committee to attach a fiscal note to cover it. So that's kind of the bill in the nutshell. And one thing I didn't tell you is where the bill was birthed. Of course, we've had increased incidents that have been really troubling, and we've seen on the news. But the one at Oxford High School in Michigan really got the attention of a retired school teacher who lives in Matsu, lives in Palmer. He
Mm-hmm.
told me I could say this. He is progressive.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very civil man, and we have debated on different issues where we don't agree. He contacted me. I was kind of flabbergasted, because it's like, whoa, this guy's liberal. He is thinking we should do what Utah has done and what Ohio has done, which is what my bill is. But here's the backstory. This retired teacher was at Bethel High School during teaching when that incident occurred in 1997, and students died. So when he heard about Oxford High School and the shooting there, I'm sure, had a flashback. And he was also reading and thinking about what could we do, just like we all do when we see these news stories. What if we had somebody on site who could respond immediately? And so he was actually the one who contacted me. And then I started this journey trying to work with NRA and others, so it wasn't going to be something that would infringe on the ordinary citizens' right to bear arms. And so that's what we've crafted. And I can let you answer questions, but I will put a plug in, because I think we need to put in several times.
Yeah.
What happens is you have, I think it's 65%, Chuck, and if I'm wrong, 65% of Alaskans own guns. So we are a gun-toting state, right?
Yes, we are.
So I would guess 65% of Alaskans would support something like this. But what we're hearing down here in Juneau is very lopsided, because the extremists that are anti-gun, they are calling up, they're writing emails, they do not like the bill, and it's coming in very lopsided that it makes it look like, to people in this building here, and I'm sitting in my office in the state capitol, it makes it appear as Alaskans don't support this, because the silent majority is silent on this, and they need to speak up, because unless they speak up, those 12 votes out of 20 I have in the Senate I'll lose some of them because some of those senators, I'm sorry to say, if they hear a lot of opposition, they'll pull back their support. So it's going to be really important for people to weigh in. And, silent majority on so many fronts, they need to wake up, and this is one of them.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you there. Well, so thank you for explaining the bill and telling what is in the bill. Um, so my biggest question and concern I had is you referred to the superintendents. Like when Biden authored the Safe Gun Free Zones Act back in 1992 or whatever it was, like I've read the federal law long before I moved to Alaska 10 years ago. And it actually said that superintendents, principals, or leaders of that school could make an exception for anybody to conceal carry in the federal law. And so I do know a person whose superintendent or principal told them he was traveling around the Toke region. That's all I'm going to say. He was traveling from school to school to school to houses to do adapted physical education and other special education services. And his teacher said, or his principal told you, hey, you're driving to Chicken in the middle of winter. You need a gun on you. Um, so he was given permission, but I don't think he could still take it into the school building, But if he was going to individuals' houses or something like that,
Mhm.
so I do know of one instance where a superintendent or principal, but it was kept hush hush, did say that. So here, my biggest question is, okay, so let's say this gets passed, and let's hope this gets passed, but let's say it gets passed, and let's say that you know Anchorage School District, being fairly liberal, doesn't want it passed. Okay, doesn't want to do it. If they make the standards so stringent that they can't, that no one could ever pass it, like you know, uh, I knew somebody who's a PE teacher. He's a gun guy. He took antidepressants when he was 21. Okay, um, like hasn't been on them since. Bad reaction to him. Never took him again. But if he answered on a psychological exam that he took them, he like if they make this exam so heavy and so high, kind of like after the Bruin decision, New York said, "Heck with that, we're going to make all these other standards that weren't mentioned in the Bruin decision for a concealed carry license." So, is there any accountability for a district who doesn't? Like my opinion is that the bill should say if the district does not put this in place and a tragedy happens, they can be sued. Like something like that accountability be in there. Is there any accountability for the school districts if they choose not to do this, even if it's required by law?
So I know what the intent as we drafted it. So I'd have to go back and look at the language because the intent is the qualifications are in the bill. So the only extra thing that the district is supposed to do is figure out the continuing education after that first year and coordinate with law enforcement to make dates available for drills with law enforcement. So if they're adding things on top of that, I think they'd be in violation of the state law. But I have to go back and look at the wording to make sure we didn't allow some cracks in that.
Hmm.
Because, for instance, the psychological evaluation and the medical screening that the Police Standard Council, it's pretty basic. I mean, it's good, but it's basic.
Right.
And as far as the course that's laid out, and by the way, I want to tell you a couple things. I've had teachers contact me that they love the bill. One of them contacted me because she thought maybe the physical requirements were like military, like you have to be able to run up a mountain in so many minutes or something. They're not. It's just a basic medical screening. If you're somebody who has frequent seizures or something, you're probably not the
Yeah.
one that
Yeah.
we want to count on to protect the children. But it's so that's pretty basic. But not only had I had teachers tell me they like the bill, but I know of somebody who does firearms training and has also done training specific to school personnel. There are a bunch of
Right.
teachers that have taken those classes in Alaska. So when you mention a superintendent maybe encourage someone to carry, I think there are probably teachers and staff who are concealed carrying right now that is not allowed by policy. the school districts are allowing school resource officers to be armed. But here's the deal: we have 48 school buildings in Matsu, as an example. We have 5 school resource officers. School
Yeah.
resource officers, I think most of your listener knows, are law enforcement who've trained specifically for the school environment. So, and that was an eye opener to me, because I learned from a retired law officer who then was a school resource officer at one point, that when you get out of the police academy, the trooper academy, you actually have to take a class that's specific to a school environment before you can be an SRO.
Right.
Because you think about it, there's no other environment that has that ratio of kids to adults, children to adults. It is
Right.
pretty unique. And in the Uvalde report that came out a couple of weeks ago, one of the things they looked at, most police departments were not doing annual active shooter training, and they recommend, I think it was virtually none of the police departments across the country. So one of the things in that report was to recommend 8 hours a year of active shooter training. And our bill, it's recommending a training course that is, well, it's not recommending, it says it has to meet that course, at least meet that course, and it's designed specifically for school environment, for school personnel, and it's 4 days. So if people are feeling like, oh, I think the Anchorage Daily News, Alaska Beacon, Alaska Public Media, they made it sound like, we were just letting somebody in the door,
Right.
some volunteer off the street, concealed carry. It's like, no, this bill is supposed to be getting people that are in the building every day working, and that they go through a 4-day training specific to school environments. Because, our kids are pretty precious, and we want it done right. And, you're going to avoid ND situations and everything. That'll be a big part of the training, I'm sure, is safety, and where is that gun at all times, those kind of things.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
but I did want you to know we've got a lot of teachers interested. We probably have teachers concealed carrying now in our schools. We actually had testimony too. Your listeners would probably be interested in that. No, we had a superintendent from Ohio, in a district there. He conceals carry. He has designated staff who concealed carry. It's working well. They haven't had any, problems. They've deterred stuff. They're convinced of it. They're 20 minutes from the county sheriff, and they felt like they needed it. Like I said, we've got schools that are an hour away from the troopers, and we've got schools that are 6 hours a day, 2-3 days away. So if any state should have it, Alaska should have it. And
Absolutely.
I also don't think it's a left-right issue, and it really
No.
bothers me that the media portrays it that way. This shouldn't be pro-gun, anti-gun. Anybody who's for red flag laws and all that stuff should be
Right.
against it. No, because you have an anti-gun parent, and I actually looked somebody in my eye who was in my office today who didn't like the bill. I said, don't tell me. I said, if you have a 5-year-old kindergarten daughter who is at gunpoint by some crazed person, you are going to want somebody on site to stop that gunman. You're going to want it. So don't tell me you don't think this is a good idea. Don't, just this whole, political thing of,
Right.
lock the guns up, take the guns away, and all that. When it comes to your kid, you're going to want somebody on site. So I just can't, it really bothers me that people would say this is left or right, and they
Right.
portray it
Because
that way.
it should be just like 4 kids. Like, so I told you before went live, I have an incident. And I think this is a good one. Happened a couple weeks ago. I have a teaching partner comes one day a week to teach the other PE classes that I can't handle I could handle them, but I'd be over full time. Right. And so he comes one day a week. He was out that day, and I had no lesson plans from him that it was relayed to me. I think he tried to send them, but relayed from me. And the substitute that came in said, I'm a substitute. I go, okay, this is the plan. So I was going to have him do this. The second class, and he knew how to cross country ski. The second class was going out cross country skiing. All right. Third graders. Okay. So you're talking 7 and 8 year olds. In the middle, and the substitute did great, but in the middle of their skiing, a bull moose comes onto the playground in the back field. All right. And he never actually charged like running at them, but he followed them in. and he got to within about 20 feet of some of the kids.
Wow.
Um, and so it's just one of those things. If he had charged, there was nothing they could have done. And like, if he had charged, our school policy, the whole school district's policy is if you see a moose, go inside. Well, these are kids learning to ski on a ski path that I made with snowshoes and a drag sled. Okay, right? Um, and they're learning to ski. Like, he had several of the kids take the skis off and run indoors, and he picked up one kid who was struggling, and he ran. And I don't know that I could have done a better job myself. The substitute deserves a lot of credit, but the bull moose was huge. I got a nice bull moose this year. This bull moose's body was as big as the one I got, even though the antlers were. And
Hmm.
so, like, just from wildlife protection, you're talking about 20 feet away from a 7 or 8 year old kid. Um, so he never actually charged, but like, I don't know how many schools I've been at where there's been a bear on the playground, and this is just in the city. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know how many schools I've been at where they could have used somebody right there. And so that brings me to a question that was on the question list. The law is very specific to a handgun, and it didn't also note that the original bill, I don't know if the current version says it, that the gun could also be in a fingerprinted storage locker. I like that because I'm a PE teacher. I'm not always wearing clothes that are adequate for concealed carry, and
Hmm.
also I do things like cartwheels and showing the kids how to do it, and I don't want my shirt falling when I'll do a cartwheel and my gun falling out and that kind of thing. Like, that would not be safe.
Hmm.
It's pretty funny seeing a fat man do a cartwheel, just so you know. Um, but like, it leads me to my next question. That playground field in the back of our school is so wide open. There's a cell tower that can be climbed right next to it, which the Eagles are perching in right now, which I like. There was a homeless camp in the woods on the other side of the fence. Um, and there was a mental institution home, like a live-in home area in front of the school towards the main road. And like, sometimes people would walk back and forth. I don't know how many, at least 6 or 7 strangers on campus while I've been there 10 years.
Hmm.
None of them were armed to our knowledge. But the principal had to go out and confront them. And I'm usually standing behind her because I want to at least look mean, big and mean. And at least make them think it's not worth fighting for physically. So, like, um, my thing is like, in a storage locker that the original bill language had, why couldn't somebody be trained in a rifle? Because it's 200 yards to the end of my field. I've measured it with my laser rangefinder for field day events, different field day events where I had to measure it. So I have 200 yards there, and
Hmm.
that would be the time that the children are the most vulnerable. Could somebody be designated to carry a rifle, or is that going to be like too much where it wouldn't get passed? Like, so,
Actually, that's a great thing, and some legislators craft their bills and they think they're perfect. They don't want anybody to make changes, that kind of thing. I put them out there hoping we can find ways to improve them. I mean, I try to do a good job, but try to make them even better. And so, would that? I think if the wildlife thing is really interesting because the kind of wildlife we have, like you say, bear and moose, it's a little bit different than places in the lower 48 where it might be a deer, or a pheasant or something like that.
yeah,
So, we could certainly have that discussion. It might be that the rifle would need to be stored in a biometric locker, but
yeah, sure,
I personally don't have a problem with it. I don't know that would, kill it. Yeah, we'd have to see if somebody were walking around all day with a rifle, people might
sure,
feel
yeah,
uncomfortable with that.
like an armed
Then a
guard with a
biometric,
rifle. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I think that's a good suggestion.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and
and
I let the committee, I always let the members know that, and there's actually an advantage to that in that some legislators, they like to have their fingerprints on everything, right? And then they have
right.
some ownership and they want to see it get across the finish line. The
Mhm.
committee chair asked me earlier today about putting a fiscal note to have the state pay? And I said, absolutely. I set up that on the record. I think, the state needs to cover it. So there probably will be some changes, and I can bring that up to members. At this point, the bill's in their possession, so I personally can't amend it. I can make suggestions. I can say, I think this is a good idea. I'd support it if you do it, but it's kind of in the hands of the committee members at this point. But I don't think
Okay.
that's a bad idea.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
point.
And I don't want to be walking around with a rifle. I don't think anybody does want to. I think if you've hardened the school enough that a concealed handgun carrier in most instances is okay. But that is one thing I do want to go over is that like me and my handgun, if I'm going to take on somebody who has an AR-15 rifle, okay, I have an AR-15 rifle behind me right now. I mean, I'm an Alaskan guy, but um, like if I'm going to take on somebody who has an AR-15 rifle, I'm at an extreme disadvantage for range, number of rounds, power. I have if 9mm has approximately one third the power of the 5.56 cartridge that the AR-15 produces. Approximately depends on different loads, different ammo, all that kind of stuff. Um, so it could be like I would be at a very disadvantage if I were a lone person going after a lone gunman. So like the one thing I want to do, Safe Light Defense makes a big old red um, vest. That's a bulletproof level 3A pistol rated vest that you can put rifle armor in. And I've tested a lot of rifle armor on this channel, and I can tell you there's not an AR-15 round you can get to go through most of it.
Mhm.
And in fact, I don't test it with AR-15 rounds. I test it with much more powerful rounds. And like it's you're hard pressed to go through a level 4 ceramic plate. Even the cheap Chinese ones will stop at 300 Win Mag most of the time, which is your most popular hunting rifle here.
Uh-huh.
And um, like, or would you be opposed to? And this has several different aspects to it, but would you be opposed of teachers being paid or getting this vest and the rifle inserts paid for, so that if I do go up and he has the jump on me and he gets a rifle round in my chest, I'm not out of the fight.
Well, how much
Um,
do those cost?
so the vest is about 600 a piece, and rifle plates start at about 150 front and back each. So you're looking at $1,000 per person, roughly. Um, you can get deals. I could probably like if the state were paying for it, I could probably get some of my contacts in
Yeah, and if you're
contacts in touch with you, and we could work something out.
purchasing in quantity too, you could probably get a
Right,
deal. I have no opposition to, to
right,
me, that's pretty minimal to save a life. That would
right.
make sense. Um,
Um,
yeah.
the other good advantage of it is that so these are Molly webbed style vest, which is what the military has, that little loop stuff that they do, and you could put a big old uh, flashing yellow letters on this red vest that says teacher. And then when the cops get there, they know not to shoot me, which would be that's like your bills definitely said in it that the cops and the trained teachers should train together, and that's good. But there's no way the local cops, are going to remember every face in the Anchorage or Matsu school districts, or even Fairbanks, North Star, where you have a lot of schools. They're not going to remember every face.
Yeah,
Um,
actually there is in Colorado there was a she actually lived in Palmer. She's a school administrator, and now
mhm,
she's in Colorado, and she's with the FASTER group, and I'm trying to remember what FASTER stands for, but it's a concept that, the faster you're there to respond, the better, the more lives you save, and it's specific to schools. And she said they've got technology now where the teachers somehow, I don't know, they're got something in their pocket or whatever, so the law enforcement knows exactly where they are. They can see as they're heading towards the building, they know exactly where um, the staff are that are concealed carrying. So
mhm.
that is a new, that's of course, your iPhone can pin you where you are. So
Sure,
I
yeah.
knew there was technology, but they actually are using it in
Mhm,
Colorado, so we know that's available, and that would make sense. Whether you have to put something in the bill like that, I mean, I think districts would be able to do that. Um,
okay.
yeah, but that makes sense, that to be able to identify, because that's one of the pushbacks. oh, the teacher who's concealed carry is going to end up getting shot when the law enforcement comes. And,
Yeah,
as part of the training, I think, they would, there would be a lot of communication because it would be set up in advance to know that person. They'd have an image. They would be, as they're rushing, they would be reminded who is this person, what
right.
location, what part of the building are they usually in. And then if we use the technology so they can pinpoint them,
Sure.
we're trying to have all the safeguards we can for that person.
I would wear a tracker for that any day of the week. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind if I did get shot if I saved the other kid's life in the first place, because that kid's, I got a lot shorter to live than that kid does. Hopefully. So it's like, I definitely just I want the identifier be there for like others. I think the technology aspect is great. I didn't even think of that, but I also think something that they are wearing that identifies them as the teacher.
Except
Um,
they would have, is that something that if they had clothing covering it, it would show through? Not that they would wear it on the outside every day.
no, my thought is you would have it ready to go and you could throw it on.
Yeah,
Um,
if there's
that
time.
would,
Yeah.
if there's time. And that brings me to another thing. So the way my school is set up, the entrance to the gym doors and is 20 yards from the main doors of the school, and it's literally a straight shot into the gym or into the multi-purpose room, the cafeteria, right? And it we have PE classes going on in both of those sometimes at the same time. And the most vulnerable spot to me is those front doors, because there's many of them. You could really just shoot the glass out and open the door. If somebody wanted to do it, they could bypass the security stuff very easily in the front office. Um, so, like, if somebody comes in and I'm with a PE class, and I'm the dedicated person, I'm very often in the PE class with 30 kids by myself. Um, and I don't think this is something you want to put in the bill, but I think it's worth discussing, uh, so that just so that people know that, like, if I open my door to go engage that person, I'm risking my class, and my duty is to escape with the kids that I have. And our gym is, like any other gym, it's a wide open area. There's no place to hide. There's equipment room and a boiler room off of it. They have no exit. So like you'd have to go back into the gym to exit the school. Um, and so like I've told my principal, like 99.99% of the time, unless the active shooter is standing out the outside door of the gym, we're evacuating out the door. Like we're running, and I have my route, and we've practiced it with the kids. So like if I'm the concealed carry person, it doesn't necessarily have to be me in my school. I'm fine with that. But if I'm that person, um, do I? It puts me in a predicament of, do I leave my kids to stop the threat, or do I stay
I
with my
think
kids?
that's one of the
So
things you'd have to figure out, in drills, because if you were the dedicated person, your principal and stuff would have to figure out how to free you up and have somebody else take care of the kids and actually drill with the kids to exit,
right,
without you, that kind of thing. I think
right,
those kind of things would be worked out. One of the things in some of the states, the only person in the building that would know who the dedicated person is. Well, there's one district where the principals don't even know, only the superintendent. But in
right,
other districts, the principal knows. So, because it can leak out, and then your intruder would know, oh, it's the PE teacher, so
correct,
we'll go take him out first. So we have to be careful. We didn't really specify that it was kept confidential, but we had a school nurse. We don't know what state she was, and she was going to be one of our expert testimonies that we learned through the training, the some of the trainers. And she's a district-wide school nurse in the lower 48. She concealed carries, and she's been doing it for a number of years. And she was just testifying. She actually we had to use written testimony because she couldn't give her name or her location. She's not allowed to under their policy. And our rules here in the building, when you testify, you have to be able to give your name and location. So instead, we just had to read part of her testimony So that would be, that's not specified in the bill, but it probably makes sense that nobody except the designated teacher and the principal know who they are.
Right.
Um, yeah, because even if other staff in the building knew, it could somehow leak out inadvertently.
Right.
So it's for everybody's protection.
Right.
Just makes sense.
It does
But
make sense.
you just have to have a plan. Does your school do drills,
It does. Yeah,
active
we do
shooter,
drills regularly.
for
Um,
active shooter, or just
yes,
fire and
we
earthquake?
do. We do active shooter Alice drills.
Okay.
The whole district does. Um, I'm trying not to say the district by name, but uh, the whole district does, and we do active shooter. And for my kids, it's 99% of all active shooters. I keep both gym doors locked. If they go out in the hall to get a drink of water, they're like banging on the door to get me to hear it with the music going and stuff. I keep all the doors locked at all times, and like would they know to run out the door, and the first person opens the door and to run out, and then they'll follow me when I catch up. Um, so uh, yeah, it's a pretty good system for not having anybody armed. But they do the Alice, they do the alert, the location, the information, or the lockdown. If you're near the intruder, you do an enhanced lockdown. Tie the door up and all that kind of stuff. Try, because the thought is that most active shooters are looking for a quick entry, and if they don't have a quick entry, they move on. And there's probably some data to support that. But the other thing is they don't have to be using an AR-15. They could use a shotgun with a door breaching round in it. Those are very
Mhm.
commonly available, and then they could go uh, cause havoc that way. And it just and the same thing about, like, well, why can't teachers carry you know bear spray or get mace or something like that? And I'm kind of all for that too myself, but like, you can go purchase a gas mask. I've got affiliate links on the channel. You can go purchase a gas mask, and then pepper spray doesn't work. You can,
Right,
if
right.
they're wearing body armor, a taser that has two pins hits that, it's not going to go through, so that's not going to work. Um, so it just seems to me like there's not enough thought process into the other things that teachers could do. They don't think that, hey, I don't want to carry a gun. What Mace will work. But yeah, but you can still spray and pray when you're the guy can still spray and pray when there's mace in your face.
Yeah,
It's not It's not going to be accurate. Probably will miss more, but it's not. There is
yeah.
that. So
Good
is
points. Good points.
is there any pushback to where, like, you could allow like mace or stun guns into the
No,
schools?
I
Is
mean, I could see how, they might decide to do something like that instead.
Mhm.
And I suppose that would be better than we have nothing now. You're right. The kids are absolute sitting ducks at this point. But I would try to hold off, to not, you know, go that
Right.
route and see if we can get the actual, weapons in there that would actually take somebody out and stop them. Some of the data shows, at the high school level, it's often somebody in the building, a student, and then for elementary, it's usually somebody coming in from outside. And it's I've talked to some superintendents. We actually I think we sent the bill out to 3 or 4 superintendents to give us some ideas, which we did incorporate some. And yeah, but you have to kind of prepare for different scenarios. One of the questions that came up, which was pretty cool, because I think they were going to try to use it as, we can't do this because insurance for the school, it could go.
Yeah.
They thought it would go up astronomically. Superintendent in Ohio said they had to take out a kind of a separate policy for the first couple of years, and then it just got incorporated into the regular insurance at no higher rate. So once they
Mhm.
proved that they were doing responsibly, safely, it didn't impact insurance. So you probably see a bump in that initially, but it would probably balance out. So
Could
that's one of the pushbacks.
the so, like, as a concealed carrier, I can go buy concealed carry insurance myself. Could the teachers do that for a little bit and be
I think it has
reimbursed?
I
I mean,
think it has to be the school has to do
okay.
it. It's gotta
Mhm.
yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, they would look into that legally, but that's how it's done in the other states. It's just policy that the district has. So
Right.
that, every bit of opposition that comes up, I haven't hit any opposition points that you can't just, basically refute.
Right.
There was one that really shocked me. It was a guy, and I'm not going to say his name. He is known in Anchorage, but it was a private email conversation. But I was shocked because he's so worried about an accidental discharge, right? And that he
Right.
thinks the risk in an urban area of a gun actually going off and hurting somebody is too great. He actually admitted he was willing to sacrifice all the other kids that were in places and schools where the the law enforcement was more than a few minutes away. And I thought, man, that's
That's
pretty
crazy.
bad, pretty
Well, so
crazy.
as a gun expert, I'll tell you straight up, whoever this man was obviously knows nothing about guns. Um, Accidental discharges aren't accidents. They're usually done, um, especially when somebody is actually killed by one. Somebody put their finger on the trigger, and
Mhm.
your number two safety rule is do not put up your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire.
Uh-huh.
And as part of the policies that the district comes up with, this is not mandated in the bill. You could decide to carry around the gun without a round in the chamber. Like I would never tell a concealed carrier to do that if they're walking down the street to Walmart because it's like trying to put your seatbelt on before you have a car crash.
Hmm.
But in the school environment, it's a little bit different. As in, most of the time you're in your classroom. Most of the time he's not breaking in an outside door in your classroom. He's going through a front door or an open door for recess or something like that. And most of the time, you would have time to pull the gun out and chamber around as you're going towards the scene. And
Hmm.
so, like that opposition, that I mean, I hope you can send this to this guy because obviously he has nothing. Modern firearms do not just go bang whenever they want to.
Yeah.
There were some instances like with bad springs and stuff with muskets back when they were first being used in the 1600s where they would accidentally go off. But,
Yeah.
the gun actually going off by itself has been solved for like 2 or 300 years. Um, Dropping the gun has been solved for at least 2 or 3 decades, except maybe for SIG. Um, there's been some incidences with some SIG, but dropping a gun has been solved. Now, a long gun can be different. Long guns can, particularly certain pump shotguns, can go off when
Right.
dropped hard enough. But it has to be super hard for those. And hunting rifles with some very light triggers that people, modify themselves. But an AR-15 is not going to go off when it's dropped.
Yeah.
Um, a handgun, a modern handgun, are specifically designed. If this weren't YouTube, I could literally take it apart and show you. Here's the button that has to be pushed by this lever when you pull the trigger for the firing pin to go forward. But this is YouTube. I can't take the gun apart and show you that. But like the technology has been there for decades that an accidental discharge should never happen. And when I
Yeah.
hear like growing up in Atlanta, in the Atlanta area, there was a shooting every day, right? Um, and you would hear of a teen getting shot at least 3 or 4 times a year because the guy was playing. They were playing with the gun, and it accidentally went off. And it gets this mindset in there that the gun accidentally went off, and that's not true.
Yeah.
Somebody put their finger
There
on the
is a
trigger.
human action behind it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Did he
Yeah.
mean to pull the trigger? Okay, that's where the accident happens. But they're inanimate objects. I mean,
Hmm.
they're no different than a hammer. Both are just as deadly. Hammers commit more murders every year. They're harder to track. Um, like they're no different than a hammer or a chainsaw or a car. More people die in car accidents. You're
Yeah.
much more likely to die on the Glen Highway driving from Palmer to Anchorage every day. I do that. And than you are to die from an accidental discharge of a gun by a concealed carrier. Probably more
Yeah.
likely to get struck by lightning twice. So,
Yeah. Yeah, the people that oppose it, they come up with everything they can, but like I say, that nothing they have said makes the case in my view. And you can do all the stuff like I said on the front end. You can have systems where kids in the high school, if they detect something, they get concerned, they hear something, they see something, they report it. But some of the data, I don't have it at my fingertips, I'm sorry, but the data is such that it's more often that when kids know stuff, they don't report it, and they're afraid they will be a victim if if they hear that
Right.
somebody's going to bring a gun. They don't want to report it because they're afraid that that person will then go after them. So things don't get reported like they should. And so you can do all that kind of stuff, but if things are going to slip through the cracks, and you're going to have, like I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we're going to have an incident here. And I came down pretty hard in committee because I knew there are people that are jumping to the partisan type of pro anti-gun thing, and it just drives me nuts. And I basically put it on. I said, we have to make a decision here, and if we choose not to protect our kids, if we don't put this policy forward, and at some point here in the near future children and school staff die, it's going to be on our backs because we didn't take care of it. We're having this conversation now, and we need to do this. So I just don't, I can't predict what will happen. Like I said, I feel like I have the votes. I just don't know if the politics will let the bill through. The House majority is um, controlled by Democrats right now, but they have a really slim margin. There is one person who is probably, he should support it, but I'm not sure he will. You could certainly ask him. That'd be Representative David Eastman, and I talked to him because I said, a nice clean bill that just says superintendents cannot prohibit concealed carry. That maybe seems, really pure and really clean, but we can't get it through, David. And
Right.
I'm trying to look out for the kids here. So
I,
some people are really purists on things like that. So he may think that the training requirement, the
right.
psychological assessment, are somehow an infringement on individual liberties. But
Right.
even in the Bruin case, they did make allowance, I think, in that one for certain government buildings and schools and stuff.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And like I would call myself a purist. Um, I would say that, if I can't order a truck with anti-aircraft guns on the back of it from Amazon and get it free 2-day prime shipping, my Second Amendment rights are being violated. And that's totally a joke for anybody that's watching this later. All right. But like that's what I would say. If I can't go get a suppressor and a machine gun out of a vending machine, my Second Amendment rights are being violated. That's the way I think about it. And I'm a purist. Anybody should be allowed to carry that. Keep and bear. Bear means to wear and to bring forth. The keep and bear arms is shall not be infringed. I'm a purist about it. But I'm also a realist. Like I would much rather protect children with this bill than no bill at all.
Hmm.
And so, while I would agree with like the extreme libertarian view, if you will, of you know everybody should be able to carry, an armed society is a polite society, all that stuff that you hear from pro-gun guys like me, uh, like at the same time, our children are too important to leave that to politics. My
Yeah.
children are probably going to be homeschooled, and one of the reasons I want my kids homeschooled, and I'm a teacher, that's showing that I don't believe in my profession. You know, one of the reasons why I'm going to have them homeschooled, it's not the main reason, is for their safety. I know my wife is not going to go crazy and shoot my children. Um,
Hmm.
like, I wouldn't have married her if I thought she could do that. And like when they get to that age, I'm going to have to start looking. I'm going to be, if we look at private school or Christian school or something like that, it's like, okay, how's your security here? Is somebody
Hmm.
armed? Because private schools don't necessarily have to wait for this bill. Um,
Right.
and Christian
Actually,
schools,
any superintendent right now doesn't have to wait for this bill. They could do it.
and as
That
I
that
understand,
yeah. That's
the
why they
fed,
have the requirement.
Yeah.
One of the things I didn't make clear about the bill is because, especially because I've lived out in villages, and you have some really small schools,
Mhm.
where you might have, 17 kids, different grades, and you maybe have one teacher or maybe two, and maybe it's neither person. It's because you're not going to force somebody to do this. And,
Right.
and we realize that because some of our communities and schools are small. So it was a last minute change where the district could assign the duty to someone in the community that's willing to step up and do it and meets the criteria. You could have somebody retired military or retired trooper or somebody in a small village and they want to do it, just somebody that's skilled. And the district's going to look, they're going to want to have somebody that's respected and considered stable and those kind of folks. So we did make that option. The idea is it's probably going to be staff. It's somebody that would be in the building every day, but
Right.
we did add, that it wouldn't have to be a staff person.
Right.
And that's where the media went. They made it like anybody could walk off the street and concealed carry and show up, I'm going to protect the school kind of thing, and it was very misleading. It's
Right.
really designed to have ideally people that are working there in the building every day.
Right. Ideally, yes, and I get that. But have you like gone over some of the predecessors for this? Like Israel has every adult in the school armed, and they have for decades, and there's never been a school shooting. The one time there's a school shooting, this is from Dr. John Lott's book, "Guns: Who Should Have Them." He's a statistics guy out of the University of Chicago,
I know we've
and
been told we should try to get him to testify. He's testified before Congress. I don't know
right.
if we could get him. I'd love to get him.
I don't have that contact. I'm not that big of a YouTube gun guy yet to have his contact number. But I might know some people that know some people. I'll see.
Actually, I have somebody who might be able to reach him who I need
Okay,
to
good.
ask them. Yeah.
Okay, good. But yeah, in his book, I mean, he goes over the the Israel, and regardless of how you feel about the current conflict or whether or not they should exist, their kids and their homes are under threat from attack, and that was
Hmm.
proven in October, like music
Yeah.
concert, right? And they've never had a school shooting with all the domestic terrorism they've had to face. They did have a school group get shot at and people killed when they went to visit the peace zone on the Jordanian border,
Mm.
and the Jordanians told them they had to leave their guns at home, and they
Ah.
did, and they
Which
never did it again.
that's a good point too. That I'd like to make, and I think your listeners kind of goes without saying. But if a person is crazy and wants to wreak havoc, has got some kind of drive and grudge, and wants to hurt people, in Alaska, when you've got high gun ownership, a lot of people are concealed carry. That person is unlikely to choose to go to a grocery store or a shopping center or a
Correct.
restaurant. Where are they going to go? They're actually going to go to a gun-free zone. So right now, we're actually got this, place that's just saying, "Come on in," and that's
Correct.
another
Yeah.
thing that I think a big part of this is you're just going to deter. So,
Right.
okay, it's probably not a very good place to go. So, I think that's a huge part of it. And and what you just told about Israel is kind of a case in point.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I have another
So
good.
there's questions that coming across the bottom, and I
Mhm.
I wasn't really paying attention.
Yep.
Um,
This is a good one here. So
Yeah, I know schools have systems, and maybe because you work in a district, I think Matsu has some kind of reporting system. I'm
mhm.
thinking most districts too. That's kind of on the front end, the hardening. Do you
Yeah.
know, is there a specific app for that?
In my district, which you can probably guess what it is, but I've alluded to it, but not said it out loud. I am unaware of an app. I am an elementary teacher, though, and that's something that's going to be more high school related. Um, but I'm unaware of an app where they can report anybody that's dangerous or going to be dangerous. Um, Speaking of that, why this instead of red flag laws? Now, I'm the most anti-red flag law guy you'll meet. I'm so anti red flag law that when I saw the state Congress lady state house lady in my school. I wanted to put her under citizen's arrest right there for violating her oath of office because it had an ex parte hearing in the bill. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Um, why this instead of red flag laws? Why would this
Well,
work better than red flag
I
laws?
don't support red flag laws. And even if let's say that were to happen, you're still going to have people, you're still going to have crazy people that will end up with guns. I mean,
Yeah,
you just are. You can do all the gun control measures you want, but the bad people are not going to follow the laws. I mean, yeah,
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
France a few years ago had that concert that people attacked with AK-47s, which aren't legal in France. So there's that. Another good precedent. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. After 9/11, they talked about arming the pilots, and everything that you had just said about arming the teachers in school was said about the pilots. We've not had a single incident in 22 years now of pilots being of going crazy with the arm. I mean, if a pilot wants to go crazy, he can just crash the plane. He doesn't need to shoot people, you know? And like, we've not had an incident where that's been a problem with the gun being in the cockpit. And we don't know how many pilots are carrying and how many aren't and all that jazz, but it is a deterrent. The door is
yeah.
stronger. So they did the front end stuff of the door being stronger and more sky marshals, stuff like that. But then the pilots are armed too. And there's never been an incident where the pilots have done an accidental discharge and shot down their own plane, like any of those crazy things that they said, and it's just a small little gun. Like one bullet hole isn't going to depressurize a plane like you see on the movies.
Hey,
All
we
right.
had a whole door come off and they still landed. So,
They've had roofs ripped off of planes before and they still landed. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely like a good precedent of those.
yeah,
Um,
that's a good example of the pilot. Were there other questions that we missed that you can still see that
um,
I can't see?
uh, there's some things that they put out. There was one. I originally had the time wrong on here. It was 5:30. So there were a lot of questions that came in before before. Let me scroll through here. Let's see. JJ Griffin from Texas had a good question. Um, and that's the one thing. Like I have a lot of viewers that are not from Alaska. Let me say this to them right now. You can call the state house or write them an email and say, "I'm pulling my tourist dollars. I'm not coming next summer like I had planned if this isn't passed." Like you can do stuff like that. That's the one thing about
Yeah,
Alaska.
somebody asked me today if Texas has this. I don't know. I know Utah does. I know Ohio does. I don't know about Texas. So,
Yeah.
um,
Somebody had a really good question and I told him to save it for later and JJ Griffin um let me find it here. Um let's see. All right, I'm all the way back at the top. Somebody had a really good question. All right, now okay. Now on the flip side, if a teacher is carrying and a bad kid decides to attack that teacher and take their gun, what do you do?
well,
Um,
I think this is part of the training. My understanding is that 4 day training, it's going to touch all these kind of scenarios because there can be. I was talking to a principal of an alternative high school, and you've got some kids, high risk
mhm,
kids, and some
right,
kids that have behavior problems. So I think
sure,
that's going to be part of the training,
right, yeah, and the other thing is, I don't think the kids should know who the teacher is that's carrying,
right?
obviously, but they should know that there is a teacher that is carrying. And the reason is like, okay, my son's I'm a gun YouTuber. I'm always carrying guns throughout my house. My son was 2.5 and he started calling them ho-hos. All right. That's what he was calling the guns, rifles. Ho-hos. Probably not the best word he used, but that he was the word he used, right? And so I eventually got him to say rifle, and he says rifle now. Um, but he's interested in them. He sees me carrying them all the time. He says mom carrying them all the time up and down the stairs. So at 2.5 years old, I put into him the gun safety questions of gun safety. There's a little YouTube short on my channel, and it's like, do you walk in front of the barrel? He goes, no. Do you pull the trigger? No. Do you point it at people? No. Do you touch it without that dad's permission? No. Okay, cool. High five. but you know, he does that. So the kids, like, I would trust he's now 3.5. I would trust my 3.5-year-old leaving a loaded gun on the bed, which I don't do. Um, but I would trust him before I would trust an adult that came over for a get together or whatever, leaving that gun on the bed, like, any way, shape, or form, because he's been educated and he knows and he
Mhm.
sees what they do. He sees what they do when they watch my YouTube video. He doesn't want that done to him or anybody else. And so I just think that it's like the kids should be educated that yes, there is somebody in the building who will respond if you see them running to a gun. If you see somebody, a teacher that you know, running to the gunman with a gun, run away. You know, like they should be. There should be like an educated, but of course that goes into the district policy and training that
Yeah, the
you
district
were
would have,
talking about. Yeah,
district could decide that. So if they're doing drills, once you have that person, even though you would keep that confidential who it is, that wouldn't be bad conversation to have with the kids,
right,
for them to be aware. And actually, at where you're worried about a kid showing up, the kids should know that there is there's somebody in the building. Don't just think you're going to come in and have free reign. You're going to get
right,
taken out. So yeah, I think that
yeah,
communication to the student body is actually probably a smart thing. That would be up
yeah,
to the districts.
yeah. And I didn't really think of that because you don't really think of a kid coming and being crazy at the elementary level. Like you don't think about it. You think maybe a parent, you think maybe a community member. Community members a interesting term for that. But anyway, you think that you don't really think that it's the kid. But I know for a fact there was a BB gun brought in my school during my tenure there.
Hmm.
Not mentioning the school or the district, but I know for a fact there's a zero tolerance policy that occurred. And like they were suspended for a few days and then it came back like it was forgiven kind of thing. I also know that there was like the rumor has it there was a football player at a high school that had a gun in his car at practice in the summer. He was suspended and he was able to come back. And like I feel like the zero tolerance policy has been really abused. Like you said, anybody who's crazy is still going to get one. Well, if we're not punishing the people that aren't crazy that just happen to have it, what are we going to do with people that are crazy? Um, back to the fingerprint lockbox. Would it be up to the district to um, like decide on which brand and decide on all that kind of stuff, or if
Hmm.
that's funded by the state, is that going to be chosen
Yeah,
by the state?
all that stuff. The whole intent is that it would be fun. The state would cover the costs, and
Hmm.
it's. I guess it's going to be on a district by district, school by school basis as far
Right.
as like say there's a village school, nobody wants to do it, but they might want to put the lockbox in, and there's somebody in the community they've designated who's been trained. They get there. Some of these villages, they're so tiny, they get there pretty doggone quick, and
Right.
they'd be able to get it out of the lockbox. So there'd be different arrangements. That just seemed like it might, some schools and districts might feel more comfortable with that. The problem with that is, unless the school's really tiny, if the lockbox isn't where the person is who's
Right.
trained to use it, that's it's not as good
Right.
as being on their person.
Right. And I would like for me, like 90% of the time I would have one on my person. Like, but there's that tumbling unit that we're required to teach in PE where I'm doing cartwheels and forward rolls. And like I said, it's pretty
Yeah,
fascinating seeing a fat man do that. But like where if I were carrying it inside the base waistband holster, it could fall out.
yeah,
And or just bending over stretching, doing stretches with the kids. Like I could it could fall off. It could print. Those kinds of things. Um l- would there be, this would probably again go in the district training, but would there be any mandating for what type of weapon? Does it have an external safety? Does it have how many
no,
rounds does it have?
I
Or
I I'm I'll have to go back. The district might be able to put some parameters on certain, what they want, but
Mhm.
it's trying to not get in too many details. I'm
Right.
doing right now a bill about artificial intelligence, the first bill that we've
Mm,
had, and that's a whole different
right.
subject, not exactly
Sure.
related, but um, for that, trying to be technology neutral, be kind of gun neutral as far as being really specific, so that they can get what works for them. And like with AI, I'm hitting the principles like human oversight. Those checks and balances have to be in place
Sure.
if a government state agency is going to use it, trying to protect the public. So more principle based. So we didn't get into the weeds on that, is you know,
Right.
and yeah, I think this is serious stuff, and the districts, if this passes, are going to want to figure out what's going to be the best, what's going to be the safest, what's going to work well.
Right. Because
Yeah,
everything's different in every district and really in every school. I mean, my district has many schools, and like there's like I don't feel like I could tactically cover the whole school by myself, right? It's just it's too long, it's too shaped weird, there are too many entrances, that kind of thing. So like there would need to be two, at least three people in my school, like ready to do this, and I think there would be, having talked to some of the teachers and stuff. But like I don't know if the principal would be willing to do it because like somebody in that front office needs to cover that front door. That's going to give us the best chance there, you know,
hmm,
and um, I just think that people really need to kind of like think through this and be like, okay, like maybe I'm not pro gun or anti gun, but like I want my kids protected. I mean, like our political leaders, no offense to you, but our political leaders receive protection. Most of them don't deserve it, in my opinion.
I know.
Yeah, yeah, and
There's
then
a lot of hypocrisy when it comes to stuff like that. Isn't that funny?
yeah,
Yeah.
have you talked to the governor and whether or not he'd be willing to sign this if it passes, or are you
I
not willing to comment? It's okay.
I haven't asked him, but I'm pretty confident he would sign it. I
I'm
know protecting life is really important to him, and he's not wimpy when it comes to stuff like this. I think he's taught out in the villages. He understands right now that there's nothing out there to stop him. I think he'd support it without a problem. But I can't speak for him, but I don't get any indication that he would veto it.
awesome. That's good. Are the teachers union? I have not received an email from my teachers union, which for some reason I still pay money to. Are the teachers unions like harassing you on this, or are they pushing back on this, or anything like that?
They have not come out and publicly said it. There have been a lot of people down here in the state capitol. I'm trying to get more money for the schools. Just even this week, a ton of them
Right.
were here over the weekend and through the week. And I think they're going to watch if it starts to move. I wouldn't be surprised if NEA pushes back. I mean, they're pretty left on all policies, and they're going to take this as a partisan bill, which it isn't. But I think I'd be shocked if they stayed neutral.
Right.
They'll probably say it should be up to every district. Well, doggone it, it's been up to every district since statehood, and none of them are doing it, and they're
Right.
all leaving our kids vulnerable.
Right.
So, sorry, you've had 50 plus years, or how many years have we been a state? You
Right.
haven't done it. So, I think we have a responsibility to look out for our kids.
Right. So you just brought up hypocrisy. This brings me up to another point. Like the one of the schools I coached at, they have a riflery team. I know it's air gun, but they're high powered air guns. I mean,
Hmm.
if I got hit right here with one, there's only one question about what's going to happen. You know, um, if those can be in school and locked up in our JROTC program, sorry, why can't we have these? Like
Yeah.
there are already deadly weapons in schools, and it's like,
And a school resource officer is armed, right?
right, and
I
you
mean,
know,
yeah.
if the school districts were to pay for another resource officer for every school, like so
Well, and like
for
like
me,
you said, you need
mhm,
two or three. I mean,
Right.
that's just so unreasonable.
And so, and the other thing about a school resource officer, his primary job is not necessarily protection. He might be trying to figure out who has drugs in the school with a drug dog. He
right.
might, and so people aren't going to go up to him and say, "So and so said he's bringing a gun tomorrow," because that same person might be worried that he's going to get me next. They might come from a culture where telling the police is tabooed upon. I mean, we do have subcultures that in America that happens. Um, Many subcultures that happens. So like I don't think a security officer is the right way to go because they could be distracted with something other than protecting the kids. And if they were the way we go, well then you're talking about putting in a $70,000 a year job when we're trying to fight to keep the jobs we already have.
Yeah, and
Um,
you're talking about multiple in each building. It's just not realistic.
no,
Right now, the SROs, I don't know in the different communities, Fairbanks, Anchorage, and stuff, but I know we've only got five, like I said, and we've got
right.
48 school buildings. So that they're moving around to different schools.
Hmm.
I mean, somebody that's planning to do something horrible, they're going to be watching what that pattern is. They're going to, show up when the SRO is not there. I mean, it's not adequate. I mean, the
Right.
SRAs are great for what we
Yeah,
have them. They do a really great job, but it's just not realistic to have enough of them across the state.
I know in my district, there's one assigned to the high school or maybe two, and then they are also assigned all the feeder schools down to elementary. So
One person.
one or two people um, per high school are assigned, and then like
They have the,
if there are two cops at that school, two SROs at that school, one might have this middle school feeding, and one might have this middle school feeding school,
okay.
and then they might have these elementary schools beneath it
Oh,
that
yeah,
that are the feeder schools. And so, like, I saw the SRO at my school this week. Had no idea why he was there, what he was doing, and that's okay. But he has to drive to my school from the high school, which is relatively close to my school. There is one, but by the time he drives with lights and sirens and gets through traffic lights and snowbanks and everything else, like he'd be lucky to make it there in 3.5 minutes. Like
yeah,
from the time he got the call, got in his car, 3.5 minutes is a long time when someone's shooting. And
yeah.
like the person in the school building can just respond so much faster, so much better. And I'm going to tell you this right away. Like I worked in an indoor range in college near Atlanta. I'm a better shot than 95% of Atlanta City cops any day of the week. All right. And I'm not trying to knock the Anchorage cops because the few I know are very good shots.
Uh huh.
Um, but if they're not a gung ho gun person like I am as a cop, they generally don't go shooting as much
Mm-hmm.
as somebody who is a gung ho gun person and a cop. And generally, and I'm making assumptions here, I get it. Um, but like they're not going to want to go practice as much. And like, I used to brag to people I could teach you to shoot better than most Atlanta City cops in about 10 minutes. Um, and so I'm hoping the Anchorage cops are better because I don't know them and I don't want to assume, but like, if they don't go practice on the regular. And so that's the other question I think I put in the questions sheet that um, you're funding the training. If I go to a training course, I'll pay $200 for the training, but I got to bring my own ammunition. Is the ammunition for the trainings funded as well?
Yeah, I would think it would be. Yeah,
Okay. Or
yeah.
like we
That
could
would
put
be
in a
home.
reimbursement.
Yeah, and well, or the district could cover it up front. I
Okay.
think it's written that it would cover it, so it could be either way. But I just want to mention something because you were talking about when you have an urban police department like the Anchorage Police Department or Fairbanks Police Department. One of the things that got my attention because I'm in Palmer, so the Matsu Borough is the size of West Virginia, and so there's schools spread all out. And as I mentioned before, we've got some schools in our Matsu school district that the troopers have said they can't guarantee being there in less than an hour. But the other thing that gets really interesting because you kind of in that core area you have like 100,000 people, right? Palmer was still in all the buildup areas,
Right.
KGB, And a bunch of that's covered by troopers, and the troopers can be spread out. So, like Colony High School, I don't live that far from Colony High School,
Right.
and that's trooper land, right? That's kind of between the two. And one of the things when I talked to Wasilla Police, this was when I first started working on this bill a couple of years ago. Talked to superintendent, talked to the the trooper of the B detachment B, the head guy, and then the Wasilla and Palmer police departments. It sounded like Palmer and Wasilla PDs, they they knew all their schools, they knew where the entrances, what would be locked, what would be open, the floor plans. It's like they've kind of like plotted it out. And I think there's decent communication. And they're relatively close, although they're not close to all that. I mean, it still could be like 5 or 7 minutes, depending which school.
Right.
But for the areas that are outside of Palmer and Wasilla, there's really not a plan. So, like Colony High, your Palmer PD could show up first, but
Hmm.
the troopers have jurisdiction. And
Right.
there was like no communication or like planning of how we would handle this because Palmer is the closest. They probably would arrive first.
Hmm.
And, how would it all work? And,
Right.
because,
The same
and
thing for like Butte Elementary would be my kid's homeschool. If like it'd be the same
yeah,
scenario.
same deal. And they assured me they'd start having those conversations and work that out. But that was kind of eye opening to me that no thought had gone into that. And that's the way I feel about this whole bill too. Is like it would be just inexcusable and just wrong to wait until after you have a tragedy to start talking about this bill. And so we're trying to be proactive here and, you know, you know, be ahead of the game. So jurisdiction shouldn't matter during the active shooter for law enforcement, but actually, it initially, of course, if Palmer PD showed up, they'd get right to work, but it get that kind of change in command when the law enforcement of jurisdiction shows up. You kind of have to iron that out and talk that out. And just a little planning.
Yeah, yeah, because when the jurisdiction shows up that is in charge, they want to know what's going on. They want to know, have you already taken him? Have you cornered him? Where's he at? Like,
Yeah.
and and I'd hate to say that they want to take credit for it because I think they would probably not worry about credit during that situation. I would hope so. Um, but like, there could be a lot of different things there, paperwork afterwards. Um, the Uvalde incident, that where the police just didn't know what to do despite all of these. I mean, I was talking to my best friend, grew up with him in Georgia. He's still in Georgia. He's a cop. And he's like, I would have ran in there guns blazing way before those guys. And he said, we are trained that we get to the school and we are getting there as fast as we can. We're not taking a rifle out of our trunk. We're not taking any extra body armor. We just go because the arrival of the second gun very often is the when the act is. And so, are you familiar with the incident it was about a year and a half ago now in Indiana where there was a no carry sign by the mall policy, but it wasn't really enforced and they didn't have a state sign. Um, and an active shooter came in, killed 3 people, and somebody who ignored that sign and went on, um, fired 10 shots and got the guy to retreat into the bathroom because he was firing so many rounds at this guy. And the active shooter, expired in the bathroom.
Hmm.
But are you aware of that incident
Yeah, I
at all?
remember hearing, and that person actually ended up winning an award or something, even though
Right,
it. Yeah,
right,
I have heard of that one.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing to me that like there's so many incidents out there where the person who was concealed carrying prevented the tragedy, and those are not, of course, not
Yeah,
proclaimed by the media.
you don't hear about those. That's true. And
Yeah.
even in these states where they have this policy in place and things are getting deterred or they're cutting it off before, early,
Hmm.
you don't hear about those either. You just hear about the really tragic ones. But
Right.
as much as I hate to hear that kind of news, I think it's important for in this day and age, we have to realize that that's a real possibility, and what are we going to do about it? So yeah, I think this is a tough one for the anti-gun people because they want to go to that, but
Hmm.
it doesn't stack up. It doesn't stack up, and I don't care how anti-gun a person is. If it's their little kid, they want the shooter stopped, and they cannot convince me otherwise. And the
Right.
whole, like we've talked to, the whole thing about anything accidental, it's just all excuses, excuses, excuses.
Correct.
And
Hmm.
like I said, if the Uvalde report is recommending 8 hours of active shooter training for police departments once a year, and it's for multi environments, all kinds of scenes and scenarios and situations, and we're asking, we're trying to get our school staff in to have 4 days intensive training just for school environment and
Right.
drills and this whole safety thing.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Don't tell me this is a bad idea. It is. It's going to protect kids, and it's probably going to actually keep an active shooter from walking on the school grounds. To be
A-
perfectly frank.
Absolutely. So that brings me to another question that I think I listed for you. Um, I did not see this in the bill, but some of the school districts across the nation that have implemented someone carrying have put signs out there that no, right under the school gun free zone sign that's required by federal law, they put note: teachers and armed staff are required to shoot an intruder on premises. If you are threatening our students in any way, they will take you out. So instead of announcing that, hey, here's a free target zone, gun free zone, are there going to be signs like that, or is it just going to kind of be known? Like I think
I would love that amendment. Actually, are you saying in some of these states they're leaving up the gun-free zone, or they're replacing them with these signs?
both have happened. I think. Let me look it up, and I'll um let me look it up real here, and I'll show it on the screen.
Nothing. I would say nothing in the bill. There's nothing that requires that, but there's nothing that would prevent a district from doing that, and that'd be a smart thing. I could see our
Yeah,
school board and Matt Sue doing that.
yeah. Here, let me go to um let me go here. That they've changed the setting on the share screen. Uh, yeah. So there are. Is that showing?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah. There's Texas schools warning to
Oh,
potential
okay.
wrongdoers. So these are out
Okay. So
there,
Texas obviously allows it then.
right? But
Okay.
federally, they're still required to have the gun-free zone sign there. So, um,
Oh,
and there's let's see, Hicksville. I don't know where that is. Hicksville Village Schools. So it seems like, yeah.
yeah,
And then, of course, there's the meme here that everybody loves. Which one of these will prevent another tragedy? You know.
yeah,
So, but yeah, it would be interesting to see, like, maybe not a requirement in the bill, but a recommendation or um, something that says, because signs are signs and people are going to pass right by them all the time. Um, Growing up in Georgia, I had a concealed carry permit when I turned 21. All a no carry sign could do, is that establishment could ask you to leave, and if you didn't leave, you were faced fined for criminal trespass, misdemeanor. Um, so like signs don't do much. So I think that the other sign, hey, we are armed, being there, and if you try to hurt children, because people don't really know, the district policies might be different, but the federal gun-free zone law, it doesn't prevent people from having a gun in the car when they pick their kids up from school. It's actually an exception because the car is an extension of their property, as the Supreme Court basically said under Heller.
right.
Um, and the gun can be in the car, um, and so it's like there could be plenty of guns. And the other thing that I have for antis and this might be something they want to know. If you walk in Anchorage and you go into Walmart or the Matsu Valley, probably your kid has passed more guns than they know about
Yeah.
because you're not required to have a permit in Anchorage. You can get one, but you're not required to. And if you're not, I mean, there are people carrying guns. I have actually been carrying a gun on a Saturday when I had to go into Anchorage for something and passed somebody that might be acquainted with me from a certain school district in school. Right. So did I put that well enough or did I just give it all away? But yeah, I have actually had like a gun in my pocket and there's a student, who knows me. Um, or if, or even in Matt Zoo, I didn't coach in Matt Zoo, but I've had some of my former players at the high school I did coach at go, walking into Sportsman's and we're both carrying a gun. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
like the people don't know. I believe the number is 69% of Alaskans own guns.
69.
I believe that's around the number I heard, but you're right. It's between 65 and 70. And like if you walk down the street, if you walk in a park, you see an old timer carrying a 44 Magnum on his chest because he knows
Yeah.
what the bear knows, and like, oh, my bear spray is better. Well, maybe, but I wouldn't bet my life on just bear spray. Um, I've actually had to fire my gun in Kincaid Park at a bear.
Hmm.
And I gave it a warning shot. Um, and if I didn't have that with me, it had cubs. It was a big old mama black bear, probably the second biggest black bear I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to go call the police on myself and wait for them to come, and they never came. And so, like, they never came. They were that busy that, hey, shots fired in Kincaid Park, reported by the shooter at a bear. They called me a day later and made sure the bear wasn't wounded. That's it. That was
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
entire response. The airport police responded. I was talking to the guy for an hour. you know um so it's real interesting of the police response times. And do you know, like in Matsu Valley and Anchorage, what would the police response times to a school be? Is that something y'all have done in your research? Or
I don't have that specific data on, Palmer's pretty tiny, so you're talking pretty quick, couple minutes, was still a
right,
little more spread out. Um, and troopers, of course, I don't know exactly, but like I said, the average time for a mass active shooter is 2 to 5 minutes. So, even if law enforcement can be there in 2 to 3 minutes, you're already going to have people that have died. So,
correct.
um, it just it's paramount to have somebody on site.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I've read somewhere that a person is wounded every 2 or 3 seconds and killed every 10 seconds in some of the worst incidents that we've heard about.
yeah.
And
Wow.
so
It
and
goes. Yeah, it's pretty
you
happens
know
fast.
so if
Yep.
it's every 10 seconds that a person is like shot where they're going to be killed, um you know a wound, you can usually, if you stop the bleeding, you're usually good if you can get them to stop the bleeding. Now, um I was at a big YouTuber gun tuber convention, if you will. It was at a gun range. We were shooting machine guns for fun, but I was at a convention, if you will, and I was talking to the guys from Premier Body Armor, which they're kind of on the expensive side, but they sell a school logo level 3 plus rifle rated steel shield that's like yay big that you could literally hide behind, and they stock these pockets on the back of it next to it for school nurses. Like there's everything you need right there to treat a gunshot victim. Um would
Oh,
Yeah, it's a pretty neat product. Would something like that, not necessarily that product, but would something like that be considered, um I mean, my school nurse would probably be one of the ones who want to carry, but would something like that be considered like a defensive shield for non-combatants, if you will? As I understand it, body armor is not illegal to have in school anyway. I have.
no, as far as whether that would be covered in the bill, that would probably have to be added the way it's written right now. I mean, there's
I mean,
nothing preventing a district from getting that kind of thing. And when they do the fiscal note, it's possible they'll try to do it in a more comprehensive way beyond just the training and just the ammunition and just the teacher's time.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Okay.
I think if we were to assess the readiness of schools, actually the hardening piece, you'd
Right.
see quite a variety, and
Right.
so there could be some interest in funds for that, and
Yeah, I would.
they'd have to, in order to incorporate that in the bill, they'd have to add language about that, and then they could put put that in the fiscal note.
Right, and that makes sense. I'm just thinking that, like, if the bill were a two-pronged approach, where you have the hardening of the schools, which ain't my school district really has done a good job of, and you have the hardening of the school, and you have the protection of the kids with a concealed carry permit. I think that could sway a vote or two. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know the
Well, and
politics of
when I open up, typically when you present a bill, you kind of make some opening statement, and I talked about the importance of those preventive things at the front end, and that
Mhm.
we need to make sure schools have them. The
Right.
bill doesn't specifically address that, but those are the kind of changes. If that would help the bill pass,
Hmm.
those are things that need to happen. And I have a feeling there's some schools that are not in good shape, and there's some schools in pretty good shape. So there
Right.
probably are some needs out there for that. Yep.
Regardless of the hardening, though, my school door is still propped open when kids are going in and out for recess. It's closed during recess, but like there's still a huge open field out there that, you know, if a crazy person who wants to commit a tragedy wants to, no amount of hardening the school is going to do it, because there's in elementary school there's recess. There's so many entrances to middle schools and high schools. You could never cover them all with, unless you had 10 SROs. Um,
Hmm.
and then that's when people are talking about the environment. They're going to school in a military like environment, and that's not what we're talking about. I've heard that argument before. I don't want my kids going into that school in that kind of environment. So you want to go into an environment where they can be shot, with nobody can respond. That doesn't make sense either. Um, so, but yeah, I'm very much on your side for this bill, and I really want to just say thank you, and thank you for your time tonight. If there are any other questions from the audience, please go ahead and get them in. We prefer a super chat, which I'm going to donate to Alaskan Gun Rights. Um, but any questions you uh, that you have, um, M. Gabriel, if you're still in, uh, let us know where you're coming from. Think that. Um,
Must be in another state. Yeah.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
don't know if you have a way to get out to your viewers and your followers as far as how they could weigh in,
Hmm.
but would love for them to weigh in. And the best thing, I mean, there's two email addresses, and I don't know
Hmm.
if you have a way to put them up now. If I were to
Yeah, I
email you back,
yeah I can email. I can if you just want to tell me the email addresses, I can type them in right here.
yeah,
Um,
okay. So it's sen for senator
mhm.
dot Shelley, and that's Shelley dot Hughes. It's kind of long, that's why. And then it's at akleg dot gov, and that's me. And then the committee, I'll give you the committee too that it's in right now. And I'm also going to, I'll just email this to you also, so you'll have it.
Okay.
Uh, oh, wait, I got the wrong email. Send it. Okay, got
Yeah,
your email.
yeah, I put it out there. It's Alaskan Ballistics at gmail.com. So
Okay, so I've just sent you. Okay, so can I see the email again you put up for me? Just make sure you got it right.
yeah.
Yeah, and then the second one is Slack, SLAC,
Hmm.
stands for Senate Labor and Commerce, Slack, SLAC at akleg.gov.
Okay, and that's probably the one where they could sway committee members more often, because.
Yeah, anything you send to me, we're collecting and giving to the committee aid, so it goes on the record.
Hmm.
But yeah, it actually needs to come to both of us because I always
Okay.
want to make sure. I'm not suggesting this committee would do it, but if you had a committee where they don't like a bill, I like to make sure everything is actually going on the record. So I'm
Right.
watching to make sure they're not, you know, so.
Right.
And sometimes people just send it to me. So we're always trying to make sure, but we're trying to get the count up so that we have more people for the bill than against. It was flipped. It was flipped at the after the first hearing, and it was I think I heard it was something like they had 50 against and a measly 5 for.
Right.
We should have several
This-
hundred for.
Right.
That's what we need.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you have my four, right? I'll email you my the moose incident.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's a good one.
I'll I'll email you the moose incident because I mean, and
You
that's an
know,
urban moose too.
and
So
for people that work that work in the school system around the state, those are of course they can't use probably their district email. That wouldn't be appropriate. But
right,
they use a personal email and say I work at a school. They don't have to tell where. If they're willing to say I work in a public school and I feel like this is important, that's great. I know I've had teachers let me know that, and I'm encouraging them to submit testimony. But
right.
yeah,
So
friends, neighbors, yeah,
absolutely,
people need to. The silent majority needs to speak up, and I know you're focused on one topic and can't, but I will tell you from my viewpoint, knowing what Alaskans believe and what we hear down here are two different things. It is people really on the extreme end of the spectrum who are very passionate. They seem to have a lot of time on their hands and they're organized and
right,
I don't know, they have all kinds of grassroots tools and stuff where you just get flooded. So
yeah,
we tend to hear more from a very small segment of the state. So the
right.
silent majority needs to wake up on multiple fronts, and this is one of them.
Absolutely. John Crump News, who's here, he has a big 2A news channel. He does have Second Amendment bills and rights and everything every day. So, John Crump, if you could email her, and he's not from Alaska, but he has a huge following, bigger than me. So,
So
hopefully,
we did make national news. After I filed
mhm,
the bill, we had a ticker, Alaska lawmaker files concealed carry requirement for schools or something. And it was going across some of the national news stuff.
good.
Yeah, anything, John, that you can get out, it'd be incredibly helpful. I probably a bunch of Alaskans follow you too. That would even
Yeah,
reach Alaskans.
yeah,
But
yeah, no,
if you have people in other states that work in schools, concealed carry, support it. It's the school community. It'd be really nice to get support from the school community in
right.
the state now outside the state.
Yeah, and
They're,
so yeah,
they're the ones that are gonna. They're the ones that are impacted, right?
absolutely. I had another channel in here, Inamatic Gwitchin. He is from Fairbanks area, I think. Might be from a village. I really don't know where he exactly lives. He has about 5 or 6 thousand. He has a lot of Alaskan followers, so I don't know how to actually get you in touch. But if you're still watching Animatic Glitch, and email me, Alaskan Ballistics at Gmail, I'll get you in touch because this is something In fact, obviously with his emoji here, his picture here. He's a pretty good Alaskan. With the
Yeah,
big old bull moose on this
that's a
channel.
nice
So
one.
yeah. So and yeah, that is so might want to get him there. And so Alan here wants to move to Alaska soon, so he says thank you. Uh, so and a lot of people have said thank you in the thing. And I know a few other 2A channels, Second Amendment channels, if you will. Um, if I can put them in touch with you, they'll probably just want to do a short, like 3 or 4 minute video on what the bill says and what it is, and how is it progressing. So
Hey,
um,
do you ever listen to Michael Duke's Firearm Fridays?
I do not.
He's in the morning, probably when you're at work, but
Right.
yeah, he broadcasts out of the valley, but he was from Fairbanks, so he also I think he airs on some radio stations in different parts of the state. And Monday through Thursday, he does all kinds of topics, including what's happening here in the state capitol. But Friday is, I think he calls it Firearms Friday.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. John Crump was here telling me Gun Owners America will help get the words out. Like I have some connections to Gun Owners America, so I sat with them and talked with them for a couple hours about this very subject and about ranked choice voting too. That's that's another thing. But yeah. So yeah, John Crump. It's Senate Bill, Alaska Senate Bill 173. So
Correct.
and so SB 173. If you wanna make a video about it, that'd be awesome. So I work for them. So yeah, okay, cool. And you can probably get all the data that they have from like they might actually Gun Owners America might actually have data from people who are concealed carrying in school and what did they stop or what you know
Yeah,
are
if they have an advocacy list where they can get out to tell people to, if they have a group of Alaskans, that would be great.
yeah,
Because I think the antis, that's what they do. They have lists, that
right,
a lot of the subjects, if you are on a certain position on something that doesn't have anything to do with this, they
right,
assume that you'll also be anti this. And so I think they use these lists for multiple things. And I don't think, I don't have access to a list like that.
right.
So anybody, I know we've got somebody who does firearm training. I don't know if you know Donna Anthony.
I
She's got
probably do. I probably
yeah.
know who she is. Yeah,
So she has students that have taken her course, including teachers who've taken her course. And so she's got, an email list, but we're pretty
right.
limited as far as those kind of lists. So any of the organizations that do keep lists and they can send it out, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so we got 4 minutes. Yeah, John Crope. So Gun Owners of America, we like to joke the NRA stands for not real activists because um, they're uh, the true gun guys don't even support NRA anymore. The only thing good about the NRA is they like do donations to help build firing ranges. Like
Mhm.
the corruption at the top of the NRA with Wayne LaPierre and even the committee and the spending on other things, and then just the strategy from the beginning of the NRA with the National Firearms Act and the NFA in the 1930s was to just give a little, give a little, give a little, so you don't give it all away. And so many of us, myself included, when you mentioned NRA, I had to hold my tongue for a second. Gun Owners America is definitely more of a grassroots
Yeah,
organization.
I've been
Yep.
picking up on that. Yeah, and
Yep.
aware of the
Yep.
leadership deal with NRA. It's
Yep.
not been
Yep.
so good, but I tell you, just um, over the years, the Second Amendment rights is has been pretty important in the state legislature, and it used to be 10, 15 years ago, anything on Second Amendment rights, it'd be unanimous, Democrats, Republicans. We are seeing a switch in that. Now we're starting to lose, where the Democrats are not always on these things.
Mhm.
And people were always wanting to make sure they get NRA's endorsement for this or that. And the last couple of years have been kind of weird. So I get what you're talking about
Right.
totally for that. And I think one of the things, because they haven't taken a strong stand on what schools should do,
Right.
and when the news reports come out, they haven't been, really suggesting anything. So it's been kind of bad. And
Right.
I
Well,
think if Gun Owners of America were to look at something like what we're proposing, that is really trying hard not to infringe on the ordinary citizen who's walking down the street on the sidewalk by the school, because as soon as you make it an assigned duty, it just goes in a different category. So
right.
now we got a question: why aren't, for state matters, people's opinions from out of state not automatically excluded from consideration for something like this? Well, I would say if it's input from out of state, for instance, we had an Ohio superintendent weigh in where they have concealed carry in the district, that's helpful. And so I would say outside state, if we have people with experience with this, where states where this policy is in place and it's working, that actually is helpful. I don't see it as where it's going to influence a legislator to say, oh, my district supports this, but it's important for the credibility of the policy that the policy would work and hold. So that's where the outside stuff, I will tell you, we get stuff, we get flooded from out of state stuff when it has, like with hunting rights and stuff like this. Somebody, that doesn't want any animals killed or whatever. We'll hear from people all over the country on that. That I don't think that impacts most of the legislators when they hear don't vote for this or vote for that. But if you get something from out of state that says, hey, I work at a school, we allow concealed carry, we haven't had any incident, there haven't been any, you know, accidental discharges or anything. I think that's good information. In state or out of state, it's good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess this would go back into the district policies, but like somebody just was talking about a caliber and they were wanting a 41 Magnum, which is kind of a rarer caliber these days. But would there be, like, for the concealed handgun carrier, would there be a maximum like caliber or defense of round use? I mean, that moose the other day would have needed at least a 44 Magnum. But if a person's carrying a 9 millimeter with hollow points, which animals are generally much tougher and thicker than a human, and they're
Mm-hmm.
carrying it with hollow points. And that's another thing is like the ammunition choices, the gun choices. Like, if it's mandated that I use hollow points, great. Now I have to make a perfect headshot on that moose under stress. So like there's some tactics there with the ammunition and the caliber of the gun. Like, I would much prefer that I carry my 10 millimeter, because my 10 millimeter is going to put 800 foot-pound. That's what I do on my channel. I get nerdy with the numbers of the ballistics of the gun, really nerdy. And if I get 800 foot-pounds out of that 10 millimeter, I would much rather carry that than carry, say, a 9 millimeter, which most people would consider more of a defensive round, whereas the 10 millimeter is much more of a woods defense round. Um, so are you going to allow that all to be? But uh, there are many states where the police and the state police can't carry more than a 45, or can't carry more than a 40 Smith and Wesson in power. Are you gonna? Would you want the bill, or if somebody tried to make an amendment to the bill to get something like that in there, saying they can only carry a 9 millimeter, they can only carry a revolver, they can only carry a 38 special? Are are you opposed to those changes, or would you want the districts to make those decisions?
You know, I was just trying to pull the bill up at the same time because we don't specify that, and I don't know if there's anything that would allow the districts to restrict it. Did you see anything in there? Because I have to actually look at the
I did
actual
not, and I do
bill
have.
language. Like I said, we just like on the innovative technology stuff, I've tried to stay kind of neutral on that stuff
Right.
because it you know having what is appropriate for the need, that seems like the most sensible to me. So I'm looking right now where it does allow the schools to adopt a written policy. Now
Right.
that's more about selecting the person.
Yeah. I
It doesn't say anything about the actual.
yeah.
Um,
The only thing I see in the bill is that it has to be a concealed handgun, or it could be in a locked box as well. Um, so that's the only thing I see in the bill, is that it has to be a handgun, and
oh, and
that
the training. Here's the what I told you was FASTER. It's called FASTER. It stands for
mhm,
Faculty and Administrator Safety Training and Emergency Response. FASTER.
right.
And
Okay.
that's a 4-day training.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
What?
and
Let me see. I can actually pull it up here on the screen.
I pulled it up too just to see. I was pretty sure we let the districts write the policy regarding the selection of the person and procedures for documentation of initial and continuing education, but there's
Right.
nothing.
Right. There's nothing on the actual size or type of weapon
Yeah,
other than it has to be a concealed handgun. And the only problem that I have with that is like um it's obviously better than not having a concealed handgun, right? Um
yeah,
but in my specific case, you know, if somebody were to attack children and they were watching the school and they were planning it, they would do it at recess. I mean, I'm just going to be
mhm,
honest. I mean, that's the most vulnerable the kids are, and I could walk right out of the door of the gym and take care of that person, but only if I had a rifle.
yeah.
Because if they had a rifle and were doing it at recess, you know, I've often thought about, if I had something in my car, I could run in my car, but oh, I'm not allowed to have something in my car, you know. So um, and I've never had anything in my car, to my knowledge. So like, I just want it just makes more sense that like that
Well, you know
maybe.
what?
Mhm.
I'm just going to roll back for a second because there's nothing in our state laws that prevent a superintendent for setting anything up like this right now. We're just
Mhm.
requiring that they designate somebody that will concealed carry. So there's nothing preventing
Right.
a district from allowing there to be a rifle in in a gun storage locker or anything. There, that would be totally permissible.
Right.
You wouldn't. I mean, I suppose we could require it. And where was it where there were polar bears around?
Right.
Talk about dangerous for kids. Polar bears around a school. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Um,
Mm.
so yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of thing makes sense, and districts can certainly decide to do that. And if something like this got in place, I think even without putting saying you could have rifles. I mean, it's already allowed, right? So districts would start thinking through those things, and at locations where they'd be concerned about moose or bear or whatever, you think they
Right.
would do it.
Right.
It
Absolutely.
it actually astonishes me that there isn't a district that already allows this and has already thought through some of the scenarios you brought up and are
Right.
set up for it.
And
It blows me away, really.
me too, because I mean, I thought in Alaska, especially knowing that I know some individual principals have allowed people to go carry on school business off campus. Um, and I'm not mentioning that person's name. I don't think he was a small time YouTuber with me when I was a little bit smaller of a channel, and he would come on this chat, and I think he told the story then, a long time ago, but that was years ago. And like I said, I don't want to mention his name, or I don't even know that I could get in touch with him now because I think he's off of YouTube and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But like, it really surprises me that like nobody would do this, especially after the church shooting that was prevented by the one guy who was carrying a gun in church and shot the guy who had already killed an usher with a shotgun, and he shot him right in the head with his handgun. Like and that was a Texas church, but like it just surprises me that there's no school district up
Oh,
here.
and speaking of that, I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know what you've heard, but I know there's churches that now, in our area
Right.
where they're designated people and they've got all that set up.
Yeah,
So, we're doing that in churches, but we're not doing it in schools.
it's
That's just
yes.
crazy.
Yeah, and I used to lead music at my church in one of the cities, and like I had I was playing piano and singing away, and I had a Glock on my side the entire time. And like we didn't have anything formal in that church, but we had like we knew the gun guys knew each other in the church and knew they
Yeah.
were carrying. But like, yeah, one of the churches in Palmer that we're visiting different churches right now. One of the churches has a sign that says there are armed security staff on premises, and you know, and I'm like, I bet I'm better armed than they are. I say to my wife, but anyway, but like, it's it just it's good to know because, and I know kind of like I can kind of observe and that armored person is between the front door and the kids hall. Like they know where they need to be. If they can come up with that in a church, why can't we do it in a school? Um, it just makes no sense.
Yeah, yep, yep. Hey, listen, I'm gonna have to close it out. I've got
Absolutely.
stuff happening really early in the morning, and it's
Absolutely.
been a really good discussion. I love that you are interested in it, and that you're getting the word out, and that you've put out the email for people. That's fantastic because, like I
Absolutely.
said, if the silent majority doesn't speak up on this, I can't get it through, and that's just how it works.
Right.
I wish it weren't that way, but it is. I'm back and forth to district not a lot. Have a lot of I do constituent meetings all the time. I have a sense of where people stand, and so if I don't get a zillion emails and supporting something or against something, I usually kind of know or I'll reach out. And but some legislators here, it's kind of like how the wind blows, you know. So if a
Right.
bunch of people flood the email against something, then they maybe initially are for it, and then all of a sudden they're against it. So it is really important for people to speak up and for us to have documentation of that too, so we can say, hey, Alaskans spoke, they want this. So I really appreciate you putting out the
Absolutely.
email there. And people, it doesn't have to be long. I mean, if somebody wants to write and explain why they think it's important, but it can be really short. It can just be, I support SB 173. You might want to put the bill number in there too, because,
Right.
or, if they say the bill about concealed carries in school, people will figure that out too. But if they put SB 173, then it's really clear what they're supporting, but it can be very short, to the point, whatever people feel like writing. People can call too, but I think that documentation is it is really helpful. It actually goes on the public record and it travels with the bill. So
Right.
they'll like compile all the emails into one big document, and you can just scan down. They usually put the support ones together, and they count them too. That's the thing. They'll count how many are in for something, how many against, and that kind of thing then gets reported. And that was what was kind of bad that first week when it came out, because there was a whole lot more opposition. And then that
Right.
got reported in the news. So we want to switch that. And, once we hit good numbers, man, I'll be back. I'll be going back to those media reports and say, okay, you reported, that we were getting clobbered. Now, are you going to report that the support is higher for it? So, but I need that
Absolutely.
support to come in.
Absolutely. Well, these chats generally get about 400 to 500 views by the time of the next day. And if you're not in Alaska, email people that are in Alaska. Email them that you don't want to spend money on tourism in Alaska if they're not going to protect their children.
However, if
Uh,
you're from another state and you can tell us about the policy working in your school system, that's fine. You
yes,
can write us and tell us that. That's good. Good to
absolutely.
know.
Senator Hughes, thank you so much for coming on. And to my audience, God bless, Godspeed, and good hunting to all of you.
Thank you.